Back in high school, I was a school bully. Now, I'm a grown-up. But I still regret those days. Well, more specifically, what I regret is not about being a school bully back then. My regret originates from a terrible memory, which I'm going to tell you about now. In those days, I and my friends, Tom and Blake, used to hang out together and bully others. And there was one classmate, in particular, we victimized the most. I can't mention his name here, but we used to call him the punching machine. We often punched him and asked what our score was. Then he rated us, and we continued to punch him until each of us got a higher, more satisfactory score. He was a big guy, about 6'3" tall, who used to be beaten by others. Even after we became adults, we often went to him and bullied him. One fall day, the sky looked exceptionally blood red, and it has bled into my memory as the day. While we were bullying him as usual, he suddenly put out his hand, saying this:
"It feels like I'm gonna cry. Please stop it, or I'll cry and all of you guys will be dead."
It froze us for a second, but soon, Tom burst into laughter and said,
"If you cry, what? We're gonna be dead? Yeah, maybe. We are gonna die laughing, you dumbass."
Then Blake said,
"Uh-oh, seriously. We have never seen him crying. Let's make it real today."
Then this dude roared super loudly like a big lion, and his tears started falling to the ground. It was the first time we saw him crying. His shoulders heaved like crazy, and he breathed in and out so heavily, like it was almost penetrating into the ground. When we realized he was getting enraged, he suddenly pounced on Tom and choked him. Tom struggled hard to escape from him, but he was no match for him at all. He squeezed Tom's throat with incredible power, and Tom's eyes were about to pop out of his head. Then he threw Tom against the wall. Tom slammed into the wall and just passed out. I thought he might be dead because Tom hit the wall so hard. He now started at me, and I looked to the side. Blake was already running away. I started shivering from top to bottom in fear. Walking slowly towards me, he said,
"My mom said no one can stop me once I cry, so she's never gotten on my nerves. Neither has my dad."
Suddenly, pausing for a moment, he started writhing in agony and pulling out his hair. Then he said in a low and cold voice,
"I'll give you 3 seconds. Run for your life."
His eyes already turned into a murderer's. His pupils were red as if smeared with blood. I thought I had to run away, but I couldn't move my legs. Before I knew, he was already right in front of me. He suddenly lifted me up without any difficulty, just like picking up a basketball or something. Then he hurled me down on the ground. As soon as I was thrown to the ground, I blacked out for a bit. After a while, I heard a police siren. Yes, Blake called the police. I opened my eyes and saw him. He was looking at me, standing still. He was still crying. He didn't run away, although the police siren was getting closer. And when he found me opening my eyes, he threw a punch at my face. I couldn't breathe. With his continuous punches, I was getting knocked out. He said,
"You want to live? Then stop my tears."
There was nothing I could do but tremble in overwhelming fear. At that moment, the police finally arrived, and they told him to put his hands up, but he ignored them and spoke in a low mumble, walking heavily towards the police.
"No one can stop me when I cry. Even police can't."
The police shouted urgently,
Stop, or I'll shoot!"
But he didn't stop. Instead, he rushed the police officer just in an instant. The officer immediately shot a taser at him, but he didn't stop, even though he got tased. He picked up the officer and threw him. Then another officer ran to him to arrest, but he was also knocked down to the ground by his powerful punch, just like a piece of wood. And finally, with a bang, the sound of a gun. He stopped. After about 3 seconds, his knees touched the ground, and soon he fell to the ground. He was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open, not moving anymore. The officer checked his pulse on the neck, then sent the other officers a hand sign. He's dead. My vision was blurred, but I could see the police officers running to me in a hurry. I felt like this was all a dream. No, I rather wished it was just a dream, but it wasn't. Since that day, I have emotionally suffered so much from this memory. It completely changed my personality. I can't meet anyone. I'm cooped up inside the house all the time. It has been already 10 years. Although I'm getting better little by little, this trauma still affects my whole life. If I see anyone crying, I can't stand it, and I just run away. There was also a time that I fortunately had a girlfriend, but when she cried, I ran away, like an insane man. After some time, we just broke up. Many years have passed, but I still can't overcome this trauma. Remembering that day still makes me shudder, just like a helpless tree, fluttering in the typhoon.
A few years ago, my mom went to do laundry. Right next to the laundry is a deli that my family likes to eat at. Me and my brother decided to go and help my mother, though we mainly went with her for the food. After about 10 to 15 minutes, me and my brother got bored, so we decided to wait outside on the bench right in front of the laundry where my mom can see us. 5 minutes after that, an old, thin, wrinkly man who looked to be about in his late 50s or early 60s came out of the laundromat and sat down on the hood of a parked car. Me, being the young and shy kid I was, I stopped talking and started looking at the ground to avoid eye contact with him. My brother did the same while fiddling with his fingers. I remember thinking to myself, that's definitely not his car, since I remembered seeing a young man get out of the car that the old man was sitting on. For the next 5 minutes, the old man stared at me and my brother with an unsettling smile while muttering something that I thought sounded like complete gibberish. I started to feel bad for the guy, since I thought he was either mentally ill or completely drunk. After a while, I couldn't stand the unbearable awkwardness, and I said to my brother in a voice loud enough for the old man to hear, "I'm gonna go see if the food is ready," since my mom had ordered the deli food a little while before that. I then got up and started walking to the deli, which was about 30 feet from the bench I was sitting on. I was expecting my brother to catch on to what I was doing and start following me away from the man, but him being his stupid self, he didn't. When I noticed he wasn't following me, I rolled my eyes, walked back to the bench, and whispered to my brother to follow me. He did, and we stayed inside the deli for a little while before walking back inside the laundromat where we found our mother. About 30 minutes later, we all left the area with our food and proceeded to get into the car. Before we left, I looked out the window and saw the old man. He looked different this time though. He had a huge smile on his face. His teeth were yellow, stained, and sharper than usual. His eyes were unnaturally wide, and I could tell he was mumbling something gibberish again. While my mom was searching for her keys, the old man walked up to the window and held out a note. The handwriting was terrible, but I could make out the words. "I always like them better when they're scared. See you again soon." I then looked at the bottom of the stained paper and saw a drawing of a bunch of little girls crying. Their limbs were stretched, making them look like monsters. I felt sick. I suddenly lost all my appetite for the food my mom had just received. I did do something though. Even though I was a shy girl, I still stood my ground. I made a disgusting face at him. The old man stretched his face into a frown. As my mom started the car, the man said in a loud, dark, and scary voice, "Bye-bye, little girl. I hope to see you very soon." My mom drove off, and me and my brother, who had seen all of this as well, just stared at each other in utter shock and disgust. As me and my brother were very young kids, we thought that forgetting about this would have been better than telling someone. I also believed the man would come after me if I ever told on him, so I kept quiet from everyone and decided to live in fear instead. I've never seen or heard from that man again, thankfully. I hope it always stays that way. Remember to stay safe out there and do what I wish I had done. Tell someone. Tell an adult like your parents, guardians, or if it gets to a more serious point, the police.
So it was 5 years ago. I was a little 9-year-old girl back then. In front of my house, there was a big tree and a land that it was free back then. Right now, there is a house, so the tree is gone. The land was dirty. It had a lot of trash on it. In the summer, my mom would open the windows of my room at midnight so that the air could run freely in the house. In that moment, I was used to go and see outside my window at midnight. It was really strange because I would always wake up at 3:30, 3:35 a.m. I would be watching the land in front of my house and especially the big tree. I don't know why, but it was like the main element in the entire land, even if it was just a side. That midnight, I woke up at 3:30 a.m. I would approach the window as usual and see outside the window calmly while the wind ran in my face freshly. I saw a black cat in the land. I don't believe that black cats are of bad luck. I didn't and I don't. I love cats, so I started to stare at the cat. Until something moved slightly its arm. I focused my eyes on that something that moved its arm. I was looking to a man-looking creature, but it was like 3 meters tall, and at that moment I could see that his head was cut off. It had no head. I was shocked. I couldn't even move. Even my mother was in the same room, but I couldn't move or talk. I just remember that I turned back and started to walk into my bed. It was like if something was controlling me. I sat on my bed and started to see the creature. I could see it because it was a really tall thing. After like 5 minutes, I could recognize that it had a head. The strange thing here, and the proof that makes me believe that that creature wasn't a human are, number 1, he was a really tall man. Number 2, he was literally so thin, like if he starved for a year. Number 3, the street was illuminated by the lights. I could even notice the cat, but the man was completely like a shadow. I couldn't see its face. Number 4, who would be out at midnight in front of a tree doing absolutely nothing? So I remember taking my sister out of the room, telling her everything. She kind of believed me because when I took her to see the creature, there was nothing, just a black cat. My family didn't believe me, especially my father. He would just joke about it, saying that I was hallucinating. After that, everything went back to normal. Until like 4 months ago, I could feel someone watching me. And last night, while I was trying to sleep, this time I was alone in the room, I think heard someone enter into my room while whispering something, but when I turned back to see who or what was doing it, there was nothing. And now I am just hoping that none of these happens to me again and trying to ignore the feeling that someone is observing me.